Happy Sunday, and it's great to be here, the first service of 2024, and we thank God for keeping us, for having His hand upon us, and for His divine providence over each and every one of us. So our message this morning is titled, Will You Be There? Will you be there? Where exactly we're going to talk about in our message this morning. Will you be there? And our reading is from Matthew 22, verse 1 to 14. So in Matthew 22, verse 1 to 14, Jesus shares a very, very important parable. And that's the parable of the kingdom of heaven. Okay? And he says in that parable basically that the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet, a marriage banquet for his son. So the parable says that it's a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. Now, what we will see in this passage as we read it is that the wedding banquet in this passage, it symbolizes what will be the greatest celebration in all of creation that will take place in eternity. That wedding banquet that we read about in this passage symbolizes the greatest celebration that will take place in eternity. And that celebration is the union between Jesus and the saints. It's a celebration of the union between Jesus and the true church. It's a celebration of the union between Jesus and the body of believers, those who have surrendered their lives to Christ. And it will be the greatest celebration by far in the whole of creation. And the question is this: when this celebration takes place, when the greatest party in the whole of creation takes place, will you be there? Will I be there? So let us read Matthew 22, verse 1 to 14, and we'll get into our passage and our message this morning. Matthew 22, verse 1 to 14, it reads, it says, Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servant to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, that is God's servants, mistreated them, and killed them. Verse 7, the king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding banquet is ready, but those are invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners, and invite to the banquet anyone you find. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, how did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend? The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen. Many are invited, but few are chosen. So what we're going to do this morning is that we're only going to focus on verse 1 to about verse 6 and 7, and then we'll carry on next week. So if we see, first thing that we see in verse 1 to 2, we see a picture of a wedding banquet, a picture of a wedding feast. We see a picture of an elaborate event prepared by the king for his son, the groom. So in this parable, the king represents God the Father. That's who the king is. And Jesus is telling us that the kingdom of heaven is like a king that is God who prepared a wedding banquet for his son, who is the groom, that is Jesus Christ. So who is the bride? Because every wedding, every marriage is between a bride and a bridegroom. The groom is Jesus, the king is God, while the bride is essentially the body of believers, the assembly of saints, those people who are found and grounded in Jesus. That's it. The body of believers, the assembly of the saints, and those who are grounded and found and planted in Jesus Christ. The picture we see in verse 1 is the picture of a wedding or a marriage or a union, all right? And it symbolizes the union of the celebration. It's a celebration of the union between Jesus and his bride, the church. And here's the thing. It is a church that must be without blemish, without stain, without wrinkle. The bride, that is the church, that is the body of believers, true followers of Jesus, are expected to be a bride without stain, without wrinkle, and without blemish. And we read this in Ephesians 5:25-7. Ephesians 5:25-7, what does it tell us? It says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So you see the analogy between a husband and a wife is the same being used for the relationship between Jesus and the church, believers. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. Verse 27, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. So what does this mean? It means that when Jesus returns, he's not returning for a church that is a building. When Jesus returns, he's not coming back for any church, just any church. When Jesus returns, he is coming back for a church that is radiant. He's coming back for a church that is holy and righteous. He's coming back for a church that is blameless. That's the church he's coming back for. Not how big your building is, not how many members you have in your assembly or your church. The church that Christ is coming back for, the true church, is a radiant church, a holy church, a blameless church. That's the church that Jesus is coming back for, a church without blemish, wrinkle, or stain. So if Christ is coming back for a radiant and a holy church, if he's returning for a blameless church without spot or wrinkle or stain, then the question that we have to ask ourselves, the question I have to ask myself, the question that every professing believer in Christ must ask themselves is this: am I ready? Am I ready? Am I truly found in Christ? Am I truly clothed with Christ? And am I truly planted and grounded in Christ? Am I ready? Because the only way to radiate the light of Jesus into the world, and the only way to walk righteously and blamelessly before God, is not through our own self-righteousness. It's not through our own acts of good work. Yes, those things are important. Those things are not done to earn salvation, but rather they are evidence of salvation. So we don't walk righteously and blamelessly before God through our own self-righteousness. The only way to radiate the light of Jesus and to walk righteously and blamelessly before the Lord is by being firmly rooted and grounded in Jesus. by ensuring that Jesus is the foundation of our lives. That's the only way. And this is why even Jesus himself tells us in John 15:5, he says that if you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you remain in me and I remain in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So the only way we can continuously, day by day, minute by minute, radiate the light of Jesus to the world, represent Christ to the world, live as Jesus did in this world, to walk blamelessly, circumspectly, and righteously before God, is by being firmly grounded in Jesus.